Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time we're playing Viper and, well, compared to last time, there's certainly less variety. For our first duty, we start with one of the new normal raid bosses, so if you don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp. With that said, the first duty is Wicked Thunder. In this particular fight, from the perspective of a Viper, I think an interesting optimization you can make is making sure you have 3 rattling coils when she brings out the cannon, as that is necessary to keep up the attack safely until she comes over to the side. Aside from that optimization, pretty much all other mechanics in the fight allow you to stay in melee range. Even the double bewitching flight mechanic. I feel that most of this fight is very above board and clear about what is coming up, so I don't really have much advice to give here beyond don't get hit. For my specific go here, one mistake I often make, which also came up here, is that when I do 3 uncalled Fury casts back to back, I often forget to check in on my buffs and debuffs. Going into Reawaken with too low duration on any one of the buffs can easily cost 100 potency, regardless of which buff drops early. So my advice is, since this fight does require this kind of situation where you use 3 Furies, to double check your buffs and debuffs before you jump straight into Reawaken. For duty 2, we have Guildhest enemy parties, engaging basically one button rotation. Such power, such skill! Anyway, we finish in about 50 seconds. For duty 3, I, and apparently most of the raid, were 10-minute replacements for Refurbisher in Alexander. It turned out the Sprout Paladin was left alone when the previous group failed. Now, the Gunbreaker knew exactly what to do, so instead of going on a lengthy explanation for the Paladin on how to do it, only for them to not need it and then forget it, seemed pointless. With that said, the way you do this fight is you have the tank grab a generator and place it next to any mechs that drop down that are on the wrong quadrant. Any mechs that initially start on the correct quadrant can be ignored. The reason it should be the tank who places the generator is because the mechs that are activated with the generator will fixate the person who put down the generator. So while a DPS or even healer could absolutely deal with that damage intake, there's just no reason to. Put down the generator and then get the mechs over on the quadrant that will drop down. By doing so, Stockpile will grant the boss 0 damage bonuses, making the fight much easier. The full metal Faust that comes down is particularly important. While it is there, Refurbisher takes nearly no damage. If Refurbisher stockpiles the Faust, then you will die. If the Faust drops through the floor while still alive, then you will die. But if you make sure it is dead before it drops down, then it will safely leave the arena. The boss still takes nearly no damage while the corpse of the Faust is on the field. However, it is more important that the Faust exits safely than it exits quickly, and so it may be nice to know that, apparently, the southeastern quadrant is the one that drops last. So, pulling the Faust to there and then killing it is the safest option, as it will drop the Faust just in time before Refurbisher stockpiles it. It's the difference between saving maybe 30 seconds and wiping and having to go back 5 minutes. Thanks to Narva in the raid for bringing up that observation about that southeastern quadrant, by the way. For duty 4, we go to Ultima Weapon Extreme, with what looked like 6 sprouts. Our Dark Knight asks for directions, suggesting they are completely blind, which is probably fine at this difficulty of fight. As I start to give a brief explanation, the other tank just goes for it though, so here we go. Most of the mechanics on Ultima Weapon you can sort of just wing it. I would say there are 3 mechanics that require consideration at all. The first one is the tank switch mechanic. Arguably, with the power creep over the years, Ultima Weapon is often too busy doing other stuff to properly maintain this tank switch mechanic to a point where it is threatening in a normal group. However, it is worth knowing that tanks may need to swap, or at least not just let Ultima Weapon run around as he pleases. The second mechanic is the spawning of Magitech bits. Yes, they can technically be ignored if you don't care, but that's incredibly easy for someone that is fully mobile to decide, producing this situation where you may feel inclined to deal with the bits just in case it helps someone else, like the healers. And finally, the mechanic that is the most capable of wiping the raid, Aetheric Boom, which spawns 2, then 3, and then 4 pairs of orbs that are closer and closer together when placed. If they manage to touch each other, instant wipe. However, if someone runs into an orb before that, it explodes as a shared AoE to nearby players, and the orb on the other end simply dissipates, assuming someone didn't run into it before that happens. This of course means that at least one orb of each pair must be soaked in this way, and only a tank with defensives can safely take such an orb alone. Everyone else must take them together. Due to the rather short amount of time to group up and decide who takes what on the third set of orbs, this can often lead to a party wipe, which it did for us. Twice. First, because nearly every orb was taken by someone. Second, because one orb pair was not dealt with at all. For the third try, we have a healer death on the first pairs of orbs. I also see the warrior use Holmgang once they have sat on 4 stacks for a bit, presumably hoping it will save them. It won't, but fortunately the Dark Knight knew it was time to tank switch. For the second set of orbs, we have another healer death, and they come back just in time to help with recovery for the third set of orbs, and while we lost 2 players to that, we overall survived, allowing us to finish the fight. By the way... No, not that. Did you know that 2 Gunbreakers can duo this fight synced? Although, with echo buffs of course. For Duty 5, we have Guildhest enemy parties again. More almost one-button rotation. This time I think we got it in 51 seconds? I found it interesting the tank used Berserk early while still getting full value out of it, because while it might be helpful, the fight simply isn't long enough for that to do anything. For Duty 6, we have a dungeon that would be spoilery if you have not yet finished the Dawntrail main scenario quest. If you don't want to see it, jump to this timestamp here. With that said, we went to Alexandria. The tank was a first timer, so when we got to the second pull, I started leading a bit ahead to indicate to the tank that there's more to pull without trying to pull for them, which worked well. Despite the tank being a first timer, I think they did really well generally on tanking technique especially. Like on this pull after the second boss with the dog things and the floaty boys. It is often easier to move the dog things to the floaty boys since the floaty boys don't really want to move much, and the tank figured that out immediately. With that said, each of the 3 bosses in this dungeon have some rather mean mechanic overlaps, so I would like to talk about them briefly. For the first boss, when it overlaps foreign entity removal with immune response later in the fight, take note that the first immune response resolves alongside the second entity removal, and the second immune response resolves after the 5th entity removal. This means that you have to dodge both the immune response and the entity removal first. Then you have to dodge just the entity removal and then leap for cover afterwards. In our run, the healer got surprised by this at the end and we had to carry the fight to the door from around 40%, which we barely managed. For the second boss, when it combines disassembly with the line AoEs and the spread markers, the lines and the disassembly happen together, but you have a moment to reposition before the spread markers hit, so you don't have to worry about all 3 things at once. The danger here is if 2 players decide to flee in the same direction. Another tip for the multiple circle AoEs later in the fight, specifically for Viper, is to consider stalking some rattling coils to deal with that, as the boss tends to get covered up with AoEs during it. For the last boss, the particular mechanic that tends to catch people off guard is Partition. Not because it is that hard to dodge, but because throughout the fight, Partition is snuck in to overlap with 1 or 2 other mechanics that are much flashier, causing players to miss that it is happening on top. A specific example of this is the subroutine after elimination, where a very flashy donut AoE is overlapped with Partition, which then requires you to jump for cover from the line AoE that is also overlapped but slightly delayed. In my experience, the Partition is the one of the 3 that hits the most often. My best advice here is to always keep one eye on the boss or at least its cast bar to see if Partition is coming. For Duty 7, we have Guildhest Stinging Back, which is a Guildhest with a hilarious gimmick. It turns out the Red Bellies have infiltrated the UI, and knowing what a mob is named isn't enough to know which ones to kill, as you really only need to kill the ones with a want to heal with, and while they seem to always be called Chanters, sometimes you'll see Chanters with a sword and shield instead. essentially drawing aggro like a tank by tricking you into thinking they are who you want to kill. The intended solution is of course to kill just the healers, but due to how strong players are now, what happens is you often just kill everything and be done with it. For duty 8, we went to one of the optional level 100 dungeons, not related to the MSQ. However, if you still don't want to see that, jump to this timestamp. I was an instant replacement in Tender Valley. Something I really find fascinating about this dungeon is that nearly every single pool has one or two really big guys that, if you don't prioritize them, will greatly outlive everything else in the pool. And even if you do prioritize them, you might even have to single target them a bit if you want them to die alongside the rest of the mobs. With that said, it turned out the tank was a first timer, which well explains why the first boss hit them so many times. Case in point, the first boss is a perfect example of what I have often referred to as mean mechanics. They get you the first time because you don't know, but once you know, they're simple. The cone AoEs expand to be bigger than they appear, so always use the properly large safe spot. The half-room cleave isn't a half-room cleave, but actually almost a full-room cleave with a single line of safe spot. The unflowered cacti explode smaller. Once all of these things are learned, the fight becomes much easier. With that said, the rest of the dungeon is reasonably intuitive. From a Viper's perspective, I have a tip for the first pull after the second boss. The cubes do AoE damage, and it is rather difficult to avoid getting hit by that while also doing damage yourself. It is an excellent time to use Bloodbath for this. For the final boss, I also have a tip for the Greatest Labyrinth for anyone having trouble with it. Start by looking for the safe corner. Then look for the arrow next to it that points to it, and then follow that arrow back to the center square to find your escape path. I know this might sound incredibly obvious, and it possibly is, but for some players, they might get too caught up in looking for the path out from the center, which takes far too long. For duty 9, we went to the Guildhest pulling poison Posies, and all I can say here is, while the mobs aren't very threatening, I don't recommend fighting the mobs in a cloud of poison. I think that could have legitimately wiped us. And finally, for duty 10, we have Guildhest Hero on the Half Shell. You know, the classic with the turtle. This one went smoothly. Once again, we had an incredibly heavy emphasis on Guildhests, but at least the content in between was fun. I don't know if this is particularly a problem for DPS queues, or if something else is causing Guildhests to be way more prominent than I felt they were in Endwalker. A lot of people doing some Guildhests for the challenge log each week, I suppose. If you do want to see proof of the 2 Gunbreakers Ultima Weapon Extreme thing I mentioned, I will put a link in the description to the stream where we did exactly that. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, in a single target fight, Viper's auto attacks are likely to contribute over 10% of their damage, so staying within melee range where possible is often a very good idea. On that note, Uncoiled Fury is a damage gain to use, so not only should you never overcap on those, I do that a few times in this set of duties, but optimally, you'd prefer to end a fight or duty with 0 coils left.